Okay, well, good morning and welcome to this webinar, which is around the subject of customer journey. In the previous session, we talked about customer personas, and this is very much something that kind of leads on from that. Now, your customers are going on a journey of engagement and experience with you, whether you like it or not. It is just something that is happening. And within customer journey, what we have as marketers is a brilliant opportunity to take some control and be proactive over the engagement that our customers have with us. Now, it doesn't matter whether or not we are talking to businesses or whether we're talking to consumers. It doesn't matter whether we are selling products or services. Our customers, and however you decide to define them, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, however you decide to define them, they are on a journey with you. And we'll talk about the 3 stages of the customer journey because those are really important for you to be thinking about when you're actually talking about how you're going to plan your marketing, how you're going to launch products and services, and with. Now, in the previous we talked about being really target customer is, and really on they are, and focusing in on how to find them and to them, because one beauty, sort of beautiful things about marketing is the fact it shouldn't be, and back in the few decades, it was very much about traffic. It was a monologue. You had things to say and you hoped your customer was going to listen. Now, of course, as we know, that's very, very different today, where it is very much more about a conversation. So it's a two-way flow of engagement. So it is not about just what you want to say. It's actually about what they want and need to hear. So it's a subtle difference, but it's really, really important. So we need to kind of bear that in mind as we start to really think about this top priority customer who we're trying to engage with. Now, when it comes to customer personas, what we're trying to do, of course, is every point of interaction with them, we're trying to create some kind of reaction from them. Now, ideally, it's a practical, logical reaction. So we're looking for them to understand what it is we have to offer, but we're also looking for an emotional reaction, because this is the only way that we're going to be encouraging them back time and again to repurchase, to basically be able to cross-sell to them, to upsell products and services to them, but really importantly, to build this kind of professionally intimate relationship with them. So we want to be engaging with them, as we say, on a practical level, logical level, operational level, where they understand the features and benefits of what we are offering to them, but also we need to engage with them on an emotional level so that they actually understand the outcomes that they're going to get from talking and engaging with us. And of course, this is where the customer journey comes into play, because depending on where they are with the journey, are they hearing about us for the very first time? Well, there'll be certain types of things we'd want to say to them because it is the very first time they've heard of us and heard about us and engaged with us. And of course, that will be very, very different to the kinds of things we'd say way into the relationship with them, where they've already experienced our products and services and already had a conversation and transaction and engagement with us. If they've already had that, then of course later in their journey we're going to be saying things very differently to them. It'll be a whole different set of content, probably a whole different set of tools, and what we as marketers need to figure out is what is appropriate at each point in that journey. So it's not about saying, hey, I've got this lovely message to share with you and there you go, and you take it or leave it. It's very much about understanding, well, where is my customer in the journey of engagement with me? Kind of where are they? Are they right up front? Is this right upstream where it's kind of one of the early points of engagement? So, you know, we're very early in the relationship. Or is this much later in the journey where, you know, maybe they've known you for sort of 2 or 3 years. And of course, you're not going to say the same things because they've already experienced a whole bunch of stuff that you offer. So we've got to figure out what's appropriate at each stage. And also, as part of, you know, what is appropriate, what are the appropriate tools, and what is the appropriate kind of style and tone of voice and content that's going to continually keep them engaged. So it isn't just about us, and I've sort of said this many times, and I'm sure you've sort of heard me say this as well. Is it really isn't about us as marketers, and we might think we've got the best products and services on the market. We might get really excited with what it is we've got to offer, but actually, in general terms, the customer can get that down the road from a competitor, and it's probably nearly as good. We'd like to think we're the best, but actually the competitor down the road is saying exactly the same. So this can be one of the key differentiators, the way that we manage this journey our customers are having. This can be a really key differentiator between how we do business and how we develop the relationships, and actually how our competitors do as well. So it's a really important thing to really start to get your head around. Now, in the persona webinar, we looked a little bit at, say, a persona couple here, Mr. and Mrs. Parker. We kind of started to think about, their lifestyle, what they'd be doing, the kinds of ways of engaging with them, the kinds of messages, the sort of tone of voice, the kind of experience that they're going to be looking to get from us if we're offering a product or service to this persona. And what I also said was, it would be very different, the kind of messages and the kind of engagement you'd have with a different kind of persona, like say Ben, for example, who is an entrepreneurial business person, who is probably using a different set of tools for engaging. He has very different needs in life. He's at a very different life stage. So, of course, you wouldn't say the same things if you were to meet these three face to face. You'd have a very different conversation. Now, of course, within marketing, we also need to have a very different conversation. None of this is rocket science, but you would be amazed at the number of marketers who hear all this stuff and think, yeah, of course, that makes total sense, and then just go back to their job and start talking about themselves again. And the way that really successful marketers do this is that they get really professionally intimate with their target customer persona. And they start to think about that customer persona in terms of a life journey with them of engagement. And the reason that they do that is because they understand that there are three things that they have to do for this customer persona. And the three things are, they need to build awareness, and that's actually awareness of the brand. So they've got to be aware that you're there, otherwise you can't even start a conversation with them. But it's the right kind of awareness. It's the kind of awareness that, they're starting to build a little bit of confidence that, hey, these guys might solve a problem, or these guys might provide me with great value. And once you start to build the right kind of awareness, they're on a journey with you. And we'll kind of look at how we plot this in a minute. Once they've got some awareness of you, then your task as a marketer then is to convert them, get them to do what it is you want them to do. And that could be part with their credit card details, that could be click a button to commit to you, it could be sign a contract, it could be arrange a meeting. So some of this stuff is digital, some of this stuff is face-to-face, and again, you've got to figure out what that conversion point is, and we'll come on to that. It's a really important target of your marketing, so that you actually focus on this one point that you're trying to take people to. And of course, if you can get them to that point where they're very confident they're going to get a great outcome, then you're starting to do a really effective job as a marketer. So it's about building the awareness. It's about trying to help them to convert, i.e. do this behavior or do this action or complete this task with confidence that they know they're going to get a good outcome. And then we move to the third phase, which is about retaining them and keeping them engaged. We've heard of things like customer retention and obviously things like loyalty programs. And I'm sure you're probably part of a number of loyalty schemes. You might have a loyalty card, either for something like Costa Coffee or your favorite retailer where you buy your clothes. There's a whole range of different ways that as marketers we can actually retain that conversation and keep that journey flowing. So the reason we're doing that is very much to sustain that relationship. So it's three phases that we need to go through, and we'll look at these in more detail in a moment, but I just thought it was worth kind of summarizing what they are. So we need to build awareness. That's phase one in the journey. Phase two in the journey is to convert that awareness into a committed customer who is confidently looking to get further into this relationship with us and into the journey. And then the third phase is the retention phase, where we're looking to sustain that relationship, to build the confidence, and I'll explain why that's really important in just a moment. So to do that, we need to make sure that we're in the right place at the right time using the right tools. Okay, because we have, as marketers at the moment, we have 1,000,001 different tools that we could be using. A lot of these are digital, because digital marketing, you could almost take the word digital out. Most of us use marketing in a digital sense, as the predominant tool for communication now. But this is still very much an offline and an online mix, and it's a balance, this kind of integrated use of tools. But we also need in our journey with our customer, we need to be there at the right time. So when they're able to be engaging, when they're it's going to be sort of fully compliant with the sort of the conversation that we're having, when they're available because maybe of work or life commitments, there may be certain times when they're not available. There could be times of the day when they're not available. For example, if you're a person who works on a construction site, there'll be certain times of the day when you're actually off on site. You're not going to be next to your computer because you're actually on the site. The same thing happens with teachers. If you have, say, primary or secondary school teachers as your target persona, the chances of getting them around the middle of the day is pretty non-existent because, of course, they're in class. The same might happen with doctors or consultants who might actually be in surgery, and the list goes on and on. There'll be certain times of the day where it's appropriate and certain times of the day when it's not appropriate to try and facilitate this journey for your customer. And when we talk about right place, this is in a physical sense. There'll be certain places in the journey that you want to, sort of be engaging with people. But it's also in a digital sense. We have place here in its widest sense. So it's both digital and real world. What are the places where your customer is going to be available and able to be communicated with? But also probably are there places where they're going to be a little bit more receptive to having conversations and engaging with you? So it's place, it's time, and it's tools. So as marketers, we need to kind of figure out this because, well, one, we want to be offering great value to them. So we're trying to do it on their terms. So we're trying to be in places that are convenient for them, doing it at a time that's convenient for them, and doing it in tools that are relevant to them. And of course, this starts to open up a whole bunch of sort of conversations and thinking, because as you start on this journey of kind of starting to select, well, what are the right places? Where should I be to communicate effectively? And kind of what times should I be doing this stuff? If you're telling me that, it's not about me, well, it's convenient for me to be doing my blogging on Thursday afternoon. But actually, if my customers aren't listening and I publish it, I've missed it because, of course, we know, obviously the digital chaos at the moment and all the noise that's going on, you have a very, very short period of time to engage with your customer. And of course, if they're not there because the timing's wrong or you're not in the right place, you've missed it. You've missed that moment. So you think you're doing marketing, but you're not. And of course, the right tools, if you think, hey, well, we're all into Instagram and Snapchat because that's what the kids are using, but Mr. and Mrs. Parker is your target audience, then why are you wasting time using the tools that your target persona are not actually using? So it's about figuring out and being really quite smart with the way that you actually make these choices. And customer journey is all about plotting with the right places, the right times, and the right tools, the ideal kind of scenario, if you like, for rolling out your marketing and your marketing engagement and getting those messages and those campaigns out at the right place, the right time, through the right tools. So I think the word here that we really should be thinking about is efficiency. So the key thing here in this whole kind of program of, okay, what is this customer journey going to look like, is at the back of your mind, you've always got to be thinking about efficiency, because it's far better to have maybe 2 or 3 places, maybe 1 or 2 times, and maybe 2 or 3 tools that are going to give you the best return for your efforts. So this is the whole return on investment. Might not be return on investment of budget, but it's return on investment of effort and efficiency and time and resources, because time is of the essence here. So we need to be super, super efficient with what we do. So I'd rather be doing a small handful of things rather than trying to spread myself thinly. And this is where customer journey can really start to help us. So how do we begin? Okay, so with the customer journey, it's all about plotting step by step, and it really is step by step, the journey that your customer has of engagement with you. Now, I'll share again a little bit later the 3 stages that we have. Remember, it's awareness, conversion, and retention. So what I like you to sort of start thinking about is, okay, at the very, very outset of my journey, What are the very, very first points in time or places or experiences where my customer, the target persona that we're after, remember, we're not talking to the world here, we're talking to this one target persona. Where is it that they very first hear about me? Where is it they very first see me? What is that very first touch point on their journey of engagement with you? So it might be they saw an advert, so they've never heard about you before, but they saw an advert that you posted. Okay, now you're on their radar now. So the idea of the journey then is to think, well, okay, what's the next step for them? So if they've seen the advert, what is it I want them then to do? Do I want them to click a button? So it might be a digital advert. So I click a button. Where's that button taking them? If it's an advert they see maybe in printed media, or they maybe see a sort of poster campaign somewhere, or it could be a whole range of different options here. What is it you want them to do as a result of it? Because failed marketing is often where there isn't a journey. So they see something, they see, oh, there's a nice logo, or there's a nice brand, or hey, I get that ad, it's a really, really good, useful ad. But then there's no what we call call to action. Okay, so there's no next step. And that is absolutely critical at every single step in this journey that we're plotting, is what is the call to action at each step. So you've seen this ad, what's the call to action? Well, okay, it's click this link. Okay, so it's an online ad. So where does that take me? Well, it takes me to this landing page on a website. Okay, so they read some information, they get a little bit more engagement. Where's the call to action then? What do you want me to do next? So if I'm your customer, I want you to lead me by my hand through this journey. And it could be a journey of clicks, it could involve a telephone call, it could involve a face-to-face meeting. You've got to figure out what's appropriate for your customer. But it's all about plotting this thing step by step. So the very first thing you do is you think, well, where are they starting? Now, it could be word of mouth. So somebody recommended you. Okay, so somebody recommended you, so now they've heard of you. Where do you want them to go? What is it you want them to do? It could be that they've seen a really interesting sort of thought leadership piece on a blog or an article that you've written online. They did a Google search, they saw your article, they really liked it. Where do you want them to go? So it's constantly asking, what is that call to action at the end of the point of engagement that you have? At each and individual step, they've got to be taken to the next point in the journey. Because what we're doing is we're taking them on this path, we're taking them on this journey. You could think as a is this particular slide where we're taking them from awareness through conversion retention. It's a nice straight line. A lot of the time this is going to move around, it's going to potentially meander, and particularly if you have a long journey of engagement, particularly say at this awareness phase, maybe it takes a lot of engagement, a lot of communication, lots of steps in the process, because what you offer is potentially quite complicated. So it's not a simple, hey, I like it, I'm going to buy it. So I jump very, very quickly from the awareness to the conversion point where I say, oh, I like what you're offering me. Yeah, go on, I'll buy one of those. Even then, there are still steps to be had, because there's something psychologically going on in the customer's mind to give them the confidence that it is the right thing to buy. But typically at the awareness stage, you might have, I don't know, say between 6 and 12 initial starting points of that journey. So your first job is to really figure out, well, where do my customers start their journey? This customer persona you're focusing on, what is that very first touch point? Word of mouth is almost certainly going to be in there for some of them. Sometimes it will be adverts, sometimes it will be articles and digital search. So kind of how are they finding you, and then what happens? Sometimes it could be real world stuff. So it could be that you're doing real world campaigns. It might be that they see you at an event or at a conference. Might be somebody, one of your people, might be your MD or somebody senior who's presenting at an event or something like that. And that is the very first time in this customer persona's sort of life that they've engaged with your brand. Okay, so what next? Where do you want them to go? So step by step by step, you're trying to point them to that conversion point. Okay, so no matter where they start at the awareness phase, ultimately all of these steps need to get them to that one single point of conversion. Because if everything ultimately focuses into that point, two things are happening. One, it's going to clarify for you the kinds of things you want to be saying to get them from awareness to conversion, and also some of the tools that you're going to use. But also it makes it very simple and straightforward for the customer. And of course, that's absolutely key. One of the big failings in marketing is where you don't plot the customer journey and you leave them to their own devices, and they kind of lose, well, you know, where do you want to go next? I've read your articles on your website, you know, I've watched a few videos, I kind of get what you do, but hey, it's all a bit open-ended. Do I press the contact us button? Do I fill out a form? Do you want me to pick up the phone? What do you want me to do? And often then that's where we lose a customer, because they think, oh, well, this competitor over here, well, they've got a nice process. I can see what I've got to do. I can see that they're going to hold my hand, and you've lost them and you don't get a second chance. So don't miss that opportunity of really holding their hand through plotting out step by step with, as I say, these calls to action at each individual step. Now think about Mr. and Mrs. Parker, for example, and their customer journey. Kind of think about what's actually happening for them. There will be certain tools that you can put into this customer journey that are going to be highly relevant for them. So it might well be that you want to put, say, Facebook in that awareness phase, because you know that, you know, it's a really good way of kind of starting an engagement with Mr. and Mrs. Parker, because, you know, they've got Facebook accounts, they're using it to kind of sort of keep in touch with family, etc., etc., etc. So you're starting then, because this is relevant for your product and service, you're starting to use Facebook at that awareness phase. Now, it may well be that at a later stage in their journey, you decide, well, actually, Instagram is going to be really good because what we offer really resonates, and actually it's something that, you know, they're using now, they're starting to sort of get more familiar with, and so maybe we can actually use Instagram at a later stage. Now, irrespective of the tools that you're putting into the journey at this point, the key thing here is that, if you notice, obviously, what I said earlier was that you're going to be saying very different things in the awareness phase than you are in the retention phase. Because in the retention phase, they've already experienced your product and service. They've already bought from you, so they kind of get what you do. So you'd say very different things, which by default then says, well, you're going to be saying very different things in Facebook than you are in Instagram, because they're performing different functions in the customer's journey. So suddenly now you're starting to get a little bit more efficient, a little bit more smart about the way that you use individual tools based on their position in the customer's journey. Same thing would happen with Ben, for example. And again, we've said that Ben is a, you know, possibly, you know, an entrepreneur. You're talking maybe the business-to-business sort of service here that you might be offering. So for Ben, maybe you put LinkedIn as an awareness building tool, and then you put maybe Twitter to keep in touch with Ben after he's converted and he's actually one of your customers. And again, the same principle applies. And, you know, you can use these interchangeably. I'm not saying it has to be LinkedIn there and Twitter there. You know, there's a whole bunch of tools, as we said, literally thousands of them that you could put in, but it's what's relevant to Ben. If you feel that Ben would appreciate the engagement through LinkedIn, because, you know, there's a community thing going on there, maybe you're starting to, you know, sort of build his confidence at that awareness phase, that, you know, he needs to kind of get to know you first, and then maybe just drip feeding him stuff through Twitter after he's become a customer. Could be a really neat way of just keeping a very kind of simple sort of just keeping him on the radar kind of process in that retention phase, so that he doesn't forget about you, doesn't sort of forget who you are. So you're just staying kind of front of mind, but in a more subtle way. And of course, the same thing is applying here. Different tools at different points in the journey, you're going to be saying different things and actually using them in a different way. So these are some of the ways that you can get really, really quite smart here. But it is all about your customer persona and the kind of conversations and engagement that you want. I can't give you the definitive customer journey, because of course there are billions of combinations of how you could cut this. And the key thing about this is to kind of think about what's needed, what is required, what kind of tools are going to serve the purpose of this journey of engagement with this particular customer persona. And if you've got different customer personas, as I've shown you here, it'll be different tools saying different things with different content within them. The key thing, though, that's actually happening here is that your customer as they go through, particularly that awareness phase, is looking to build some faith and trust in what you do. This is a psychological process that happens in that awareness phase and that starts to help you make those choices about, which tools are going to be appropriate. So just know that whether you decide to choreograph and map this journey out or not, what's happening in your customer's brain as they go through the awareness to the point of conversion is that what we're looking to do here is build their faith that they're in the right place, converting or conversing rather with the right company, and that's you. So you've got to build their faith that they're going to get a good solution. And then just before going through this step-by-step process, just before they convert and sign a contract or do the deal or give you their credit card details or buy that product or service, just before that happens, you've got to help them to trust you. So what we can do there is a really, really simple thing, is we can give them examples of people who have been before them down this journey. So this is where we use things like case studies, testimonials, references, little video clips of happy customers who are just like them. So ideally, if it's Ben, just before Ben converts, you've taken him through this awareness stage, step by step by step. Just before he converts, you show him other Bens who have been really happy with the services and the brand kind of values and outcomes that you've given them. And if he sees that, then he'll trust you. Then whatever you want to sell him, he's very likely to buy. Because what you've done is you build faith he's going to get a good outcome. You've allowed him to trust you, and you've been using the right tools to keep that engagement going, and you've handheld him step by step to that point of conversion. He will convert. Why would he not convert? You've done all the jobs as a marketer to give him that psychological confidence. You've also done the emotional stuff. You've helped him understand that this is the only place he needs to be. And then he'll convert. And then you can move then into the retention phase, drip feeding content, drip feeding ideas, looking for feedback, building that loyalty, to making sure that you're getting to a point where he is willing to advocate you. So he becomes an advocate. He starts to talk to his peers, his family and friends about the great stuff that you're doing with him. And of course, by doing that, he's bringing other Bens, or if it's Mr. and Mrs. Parker, they're bringing other Mr. and Mrs. Parkers into that awareness phase, and then you're helping them through the journey as well. So you can start to scale this. And this is the really, really amazing benefit of taking this customer journey approach. There's a scalability associated with this. This isn't a one-time activity. It's about constantly learning and listening to which tools are working best at different points in the journey. But it's also about making sure that if you provide that great value and that great engagement at the retention phase, where you're retaining that conversation and that engagement with whoever your persona is, they will start to talk and share. And the advocacy is like gold dust to you. You can do this as a marketer. They become part of your marketing team. So they help you then to be promoting and sharing all the good stuff that you're doing and bringing more people just like them into the customer journey. And all you have to do is just make sure people flow beautifully and smoothly and seamlessly through the journey. And that is it. That is customer journey. So we've got 3 phases: building awareness. Got to get the name out there. You've got to get those first points of contact there. But then understanding as they go from awareness to conversion, what are those ways and tools and content that you're going to help to build faith and trust in that target persona's mind? What is that single point of conversion? What is that single point that's going to allow them to really kind of understand where you're taking them to? And that's the point where, they turn from being like a prospect who could be interested into being a real customer. And then beyond that, how can you keep them in this kind of holding pattern? So you can drip feed content, maybe it's a newsletter, maybe it's Twitter, maybe there's some other kind of engagement or loyalty program or tools, keeping them like as a VIP, so they feel like a VIP as part of this. What kinds of things are you going to do to retain them? Because if you do that, 2 things will happen. 1, they'll come back and they'll engage with you again. And 2, they'll start to share and be advocates. And that really is the huge benefit of plotting out the customer journey. So it's going to happen anyway. Your customers are going to be doing this anyway. So far better to be plotting this than it is to be just kind of letting them get on with it. Because by doing this, you can measure every single point, and you can unblock where there's a little sort of bottleneck. Maybe people don't understand how to get from a certain point in the journey to the next point, and it's like, oh right, well we haven't got a very clear button there, or oh yeah, well we haven't really sort of got a phone number for them to call, and actually they would much rather call at this point, or oh yeah, you just get those kind of little wake up moments, and if you can do that, that's a really powerful way of controlling this, and then you can unblock those little bottlenecks and get as many people through confidently to that conversion point as you can. So it's a really, really vital process as part of this kind of marketing portfolio. And as we've seen, you can put then specific tools in at specific points in the journey to perform specific functions with specific content. It's all about being really smart and being really well defined in what you do. It isn't about just, hey, we did some blogs, or hey, you know, we're on Twitter, or look at us in our Facebook group. You know, it's kind of what is the job of that Facebook group, or what is the job of that blog? And if it isn't to then take people deeper into the customer journey, I think you should really be questioning why it's in the mix at all. So everything that you do, ideally, should be adding value in your customer journey. But begin at the top, begin with that awareness stage. Figure out those very first points in time where your customers have heard about you for the very first time, both digitally and real world, and then figure out the very next step, and the step after that, and the step after that, and see if you can get them filtered down to that point of conversion. Because if you can do that, you stand a much, much better chance of being able to really, truly engage with your customers going forward in a really powerful sense. So that's the end of the presentation. So what I'm going to do now, hopefully you found that that it made sense. So what I'm going to do is now open up the microphones. So everybody who is on the call is now unmuted, if you choose to be unmuted. And I'll take any kind of questions or anything that anybody would like to share. If you've tried it yourselves, if you've sort of done this, you know, I'd be very interested to know kind of how it went, and whether you've sort of been part of this kind of process before, whether you've seen this before, and if it's brand new to you and it's the very first time you've even seen a concept like this, I'd also be very interested to know kind of what you think. So over to you. Questions, please. If you're feeling shy about asking questions, you can always use the chat facility, which you can see there on the screen.
I'm just wondering, you mentioned that kind of you should look at everything that you do in terms of the marketing mix, and it should always fall somewhere in that process. Is there any time that you can think of kind of a tactic or, you know, a means of kind of using, you know, something, whether it's digital or not, that doesn't necessarily have to fall somewhere along the way? Or do you think it's kind of just a general rule of thumb that you should always be able to pinpoint it somewhere?
That is a really good question. I think for me, if you can show that there's real measurable value in the other stuff that you're doing, and then there's a really kind of important strategic reason why you'd be doing it, then I'd say, yeah, there probably is a part to play for it. I would question, and often I've seen both with clients and businesses that I've worked in before, I've often seen examples of, oh yeah, but we've got to do this because the competition are doing it. or, you know, we need to be at this event, we need to have an exhibition stand because, you know, company X down the road have got an exhibition stand and will look like we're not serious about things. And, you know, these little sort of standalone, almost I would argue kind of wrong reasons for doing marketing can often take a lot of time and a lot of energy. But I think, you know, if there's a strategic reason why a little standalone campaign or a little standalone piece of activity, maybe it's, you know, you're researching a new market, for example, so you want to do some activity and then just see whether you get any traction. Or it could be that, you know, you've got a new product or service that you want to bring out, but you want to test it first, so it might be at a beta stage rather than a full launch, so you don't actually want to put it into a full kind of customer journey because actually you're not totally confident it's right yet. I think those could be times when, you know, you might think, oh, actually, no, we don't want to make this mainstream and we don't want to shout about it too much, but we still want to be doing it. So I think those could be sort of 2 times when you would do it, but it's only really worth doing if you've got some real measurable value coming out the other side of it. So if you're just doing it because you think the rest of the world is doing it, and I often see this with social media, it's like, oh, we've got to be on Twitter because everyone's on Twitter, and we've got to be looking at Snapchat. It's like, well, hold on, whoa, if your customer persona is not doing it and actually you've got no intention of getting value from it, why are you wasting time doing it? But still so many people just jump on this great wave of, yeah, but everyone's doing it, so there must be a reason. And they kind of do it blindly and it's not really adding value. But I think if you're doing it consciously to test something or consciously to open up potentially opportunity in the future, then I'd say, yeah, go do it, go try it. But only if you can really measure it.
Okay. No, good.
But good questions, really good question. So yeah, I think as long as you're conscious with it, give it a go. But I think the vast, I would say it's probably even 90% and 10%. So probably 90% of what you're doing really should be tied into a journey. Maybe 10% is the kind of test stuff that you're doing. It's that kind of balance, really.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other observations or questions? I'm guessing for sort of quite a few of the people sort of watching this, and if you're watching this on catch up, as they say, I'm guessing this could be a very new thing sort of for you in terms of a concept, because, you know, a lot of the time, you know, a lot of people haven't actually you know, sort of done, you know, a process like this before, so it is going to be something you know, that is going to be sort of a test and really trying to get your head around it. So I think for lots of people, it is going to be about, you know, almost like getting some flip charts out, getting some post-its out, and just beginning to play with the concept and play with the idea. I mean, I can remember the very first time actually, as a client, we went to a sort of particular client and ran through this when we were kind of testing this process out. This must be 10, 12 years ago now. With a particular, it was a public sector client, and they said, actually, yeah, we reckon we've got about sort of 20 steps in our journey, that awareness phase. And honestly, we spent a day with them plotting with post-its out, and they were into the hundreds of steps. I mean, once you start on this journey, you just realize, oh my God, it's so complicated. And if it's complicated when you're plotting that out with post-it notes, imagine what it's like for your target persona. You know, they see this thing and they think, oh my God, where do I go next? So I've had a question come through on the chat, which was, as a council, we're trying to inform the area about what we do. It's therefore more about finding out what the public want to hear about, such as potholes, for example, because this is specifically for highways, rather than actually potentially sort of, you know, looking at behavioural change. That's a good question, because I still think there's a part to play for using a journey as part of research, or as part of kind of like an inbound information flow. Because what you're trying to do there, the point of conversion there, if you're using a journey to collect information, excuse me, the inbound kind of information is still part of a journey, because you've got to build, you know, the faith and the trust in the person who's going to be submitting the information. So if you're using this to gather information from your target audience, they're still going to have to kind of figure out a way of, you know, doing it that, you know, doesn't involve lots of effort on their part. So there's still a journey to be had. I think obviously you've got to make them aware that you want to collect this information. They then got to be able to see that, there's a number of ways of submitting it. It might be through, download this app and report back this thing, or it could be, complete this form, or it could be, phone this number. But there's still a journey for them to be had to get from the, oh, you want to collect that information, through to, okay, I'm going to press the submit button. It's not just a case of, hey, we put it out there and then we sat back and waited. It's very much about, you're sort of choreographing that journey sort of step by step through. So, yeah, so kind of, again, use the Post-it notes to kind of plot out what would it look like from their perspective. I think that's going to be a really important one to do, because as we say, it can be outbound sort of proactive marketing going out there, but it can also be very much about inbound kind of new business, as it were, if you're in a commercial organization. So yeah, so really good question there, so thank you for that one as well. So the key thing very much here is it's about getting those Post-its out, starting that journey really from that first point of awareness. And then once you get to that kind of point of conversion, really start to think really carefully about how you're going to do this retention phase, because you find actually a lot of the big value of the customer journey is going to come in that retention phase. So it's later in the customer journey, because it's with people who already know you, so you've already built that relationship with them. So if you can keep them engaged, and if you can keep them on side and figure out what tools and what kind of journey is going to be appropriate for them, and often timing comes into play here. So the timing thing is, how frequently should you be blogging? How frequently should you be tweeting? How often should you be sending out that newsletter? So it's very much about listening to the responses that you get back from those customers who are in the retention phase, kind of listening to the feedback that you get. If people say, oh, no, you send me, I'm going to unsubscribe because you send it to me too frequently, or, oh, I hardly ever hear from you. You only ever send it out, once a year. You've got to really listen to the kind of feedback that comes in, because these are really valuable people, because they're existing customers. They probably will want to engage with you if you get it right. So, I would always start at the awareness phase, because that's a nice, easy starting point. But don't lose sight of that retention phase, because, you've got a captive audience in there already. So just going back to that example of, data collection, if you have a database of people who've already submitted information to you in the past, it could well be that they're going to be more receptive than, your average sort of target persona to actually, submit again. So maybe for sometimes there is a good reason for starting at the retention phase with people you already know. But if you're beginning this whole process and playing with customer journey, I would generally suggest probably starting at that awareness phase. So I hope you found that useful little exercise. As I say, just sort of continually focus on those 3 stages and just really get your head around which tools are going to be most appropriate for this target persona at each of those phases, which things are going to help me to build faith and trust, which things are going to help me to drip feed content after this sort of persona converts, and have a little play with that journey. And I'm sure as you plot this out, maybe using the Post-its and flip charts, I'm sure you'll find there's a lot more steps in the journey than you first thought. But have a little play, let me know how it goes, and I've no doubt we'll be catching up again soon when you come to the whole customer journey stage actually in the program. So thank you very much for all the questions. Thank you for everything that's been sort of shared, and thank you for listening. And yeah, so post any comments on Slack if there's any sort of further questions that you have that you think would be of interest to everyone. And we will see you again on the next webinar next month. So thanks for coming, and I'll see you again very soon.
Thank you.